Hello and welcome to the 9th video in the composition series, Good Day. In this video we'll review a couple composition notes and see how I feel like I improved my original idea to make it a little bit more clean and melodically more defined. And I'll tell you what I mean by that and show a couple of examples. So in this little piece, the chords are really triads. What that means is that they're played with 3 notes. For example, here's the C major triad, and then you have the G major triad. And for C, that's C, E, and G. And then on the G, you have G, B, and D. So one goal in this composition series is to be more intentional about how the chords, the melodies, and other instruments, whether that be piano or bass, interact with each other and to make better sounding music. Because it's one thing to play an instrument by itself as seen as one whole unit versus if you play multiple instruments and how they interact. You have to think about it a little bit differently. For example, if I played the open position C major, which is like what you first learn when you start playing, or of course is a great chord, that's a lot of notes. And here's the G. And these are wonderful chords. But, however, I think sometimes that can take away from, for example, your other instrument. You know, for example, even just on the guitar, here I'm playing the low E string C, and then the octave of that C. And then you play the third of that, and then that sounds like a chord. Well, the problem with the open strings is that you're doubling up on a lot of notes and you're not really giving the music direction. Because, for example, what that means by direction is that, so this is the D with its third, between the major third and the minor third. At least you get some feeling from that. Whereas if you just play the D, it sounds very nice, but it's not really moving the music to a certain direction or feel. So the point is that when composing with multiple instruments, you have to take that additional layer of thinking about how all the other notes are interacting with each other. You don't want to interfere or make a melody vague. Alright, so that is a long-winded way to say that when I originally wrote this melody, I had the first note of the first and second measure being the root. One minor tweak I did was to change that to play the third of the chord. So for C major, that means that I originally, in the melody, was playing, so but then I changed that to, so instead of playing the root, which the bass already plays, I played the third of the chord of C, which is E. Because remember, in the major triad, it's C, E, G. And I'll show you that with the recording. And that's okay, but it doesn't stand out. And here's it with the third. And if I rewind, if you really listen to it, you can kind of hear that unison. Versus the third right there. So what playing the third in that melody does is lets the note stand out, and it doesn't get what I'll call muddled or muddied. So if we think of all the instruments merged into one, then I think it helps, at least for me, think of the idea that we want to make space for other notes, and you don't always just want to double up on particular notes, especially to set the tone for the music, which is the first note that's actually played literally in this song. And sometimes I'll switch between adding the third and the bass. You don't always have to play the root note. And technically in the chord I play the root note, and maybe someone would advise me against that, but I kept that as is in this case. And lastly, we'll take a quick look at the drums. In keeping with that simplified philosophy, I chose not to add the cymbals. I was trying to make it work, but in my mind, it didn't work that well. So I kept it really simple, with just the bass drum, snare, and then a little tom hit to add some variety. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you in the next one.